Welcome to Signal Ahead. I'm Alfred. Today's briefing, Cybersecurity. Sunday, August the 16th. This is the synthesis above the noise. Not the headlines, but the deep currents beneath them. Let's get into it. Let me tell you about a squid. There's a rather lovely piece of footage doing the rounds. Researchers hunting for the colossal squid in the deep ocean and discovering something faintly humbling. Their bright white searchlights, the very instruments meant to reveal the creatures of the abyss, were scaring everything away. The animals fled the glare. It was only when the researchers switched to soft red light the deep-sea creatures can't perceive as a threat, that the ocean began, quietly, to show itself. Bait to draw things in, a gentler wavelength. And suddenly the giants appeared. I want you to hold that image, because it is, I think, the truest picture we have of the state of cybersecurity right now. For 30 years we have been shining brighter and brighter lights into the dark, convinced that illumination is the same as understanding. More scanners, more alerts, more dashboards blazing red. And what we are only now beginning to grasp is that the light itself changes what we can see, and increasingly who is doing the looking is not a person at all. Here is the non-obvious thread, the one a casual reader of the week's headlines would miss entirely. Scroll through any given day's security news, and you'll see it as a jumble of unrelated disasters. A Brazilian bank fraud ring exploiting a service provider. A hardware wallet maker breached, not directly, but through its shipping partner. A Scottish prosecutor's office leaking data because of a third party that also served other agencies. Ring Central, 1.6 million accounts taken through the company itself and spilling outward. To the untrained eye, these are separate stories. They are not. They are the same story told 7 times. The perimeter you are defending is no longer yours. It belongs to your logistics vendor, your syslog server, your OAuth token issuer. The SAP instance you patched 3 days ago that was already under attack before the patch had cooled. The attack surface has quietly migrated off your premises and into the tangle of relationships you can't see and don't control. And now, this is the second thread, and it braids into the first. The light itself has become intelligent, and it cuts both ways. Consider what's actually happening. The volume of discovered vulnerabilities is surging, and everyone knows why. Machines are now doing the finding. AI-augmented scanning has turned bug discovery into something closer to industrial phishing. The standards body responsible for cataloging these flaws is drowning in the catch, and its proposed lifeboat is, of all things, more AI. Fight the tide with the tide. Meanwhile, the same generative tools that write our code are hallucinating open-source dependencies faster than any human reviewer can vet them, smuggling phantom packages into the supply chain at a speed governance was never built to match. So watch how symmetrical this has become. One lab begins watermarking the text its model produces, an attempt to bring a little order, a little provenance, to the flood of machine-made words. Within days, watermark removers bloom across the web, thousands of stars on a code repository, paid evasion services, almost none of which can prove they work, because the detector was never released. So the whole contest plays out in a fog where nobody can verify anything. That is the field in miniature. Measure and countermeasure. Both automated, both unfalsifiable, spiraling faster than human judgment can adjudicate. And the humans, notice, have not disappeared. They've simply moved. The interesting figures now are not the ones at the keyboard. They're the CISO learning to speak the language of the boardroom, translating packet loss into balance sheet risk. They're the board members who, we're told, consistently underestimate technology risk until it detonates into crisis. There's even a billion-dollar acquisition premised on the idea that privileged access must now be defined not by static roles, but by business context. Because the thing requesting access might be a software agent, not an employee, and it doesn't fit the old categories at all. And, most striking of all, a White House memo inviting private security firms to apply for permission to hack back, to shine their own offensive light into foreign darkness under state license. The searchlight, weaponized and franchised. So where does the domain stand? It stands at the moment the deep-sea researchers reached with their red lamps, realizing that brute illumination has been counterproductive, that the ecosystem we're trying to observe is vaster and more interconnected than our instruments assumed, and that the instruments themselves have started acting on their own. Defense and attack are both accelerating past the pace of human comprehension, and the boundary of the thing we're defending has dissolved into a web of others. Over the next 3 parts of our conversation, I want to follow that dissolution carefully. First, how the supply chain became the true battlefield. Then, what it means when both sword and shield are automated. And finally, the harder question, who or what we ought to trust to hold the light. Because the colossal squid, remember, was always down there. We simply couldn't see it without changing how we looked. If you set out all the week's headlines on a table and squint, you begin to notice they are not really separate stories. There is a botnet quietly conscripting home routers into relay nodes. There is a ransomware crew rebooting a machine into safe mode to strip away its defenses. There is a hardware wallet maker breached not through its own doors, but through the loading dock of its shipping partner. There is a Scottish prosecutor's office losing data because a third party that served it also served a great many others. And there is a bank robbed of 30 million euros because a service provider had a flaw the bank never controlled. Different actors, different techniques, different continents, and yet the same deep current runs beneath every one of them. The current is this: for 2 decades we built security around the fortress. You had a perimeter, you decided who was inside and who was outside, and you spent your budget on the wall. That model assumed you could draw a clean line around the thing you were defending. What this week quietly announces is that the line has dissolved entirely. The organization you are trying to protect no longer has edges. It is a mesh of dependencies. Your shipping partner, your syslog server, your license server, your OAuth tokens, your cloud commerce platform, the ad networks running silently inside your app. Each of those is a door, and most of them are doors you do not own, cannot see, and did not know were there. Consider the mechanism of the great breaches. The wallet company did nothing wrong. In the old sense, it wasn't phished, it wasn't running unpatched software, its logistics provider was compromised, and 14,000 customers inherited the consequence. The oil giant investigating data theft, the telephony firm losing information on 1.6 million accounts. These are not stories of a wall being scaled. They are stories of trust flowing downhill through a supply chain until it pools somewhere soft. The attacker no longer needs to breach you. He needs to breach whoever you trust and let gravity do the rest. This is why the industry has begun talking about the entire attack chain rather than the front door. A workspace intrusion, we're told, need not begin with a phishing email at all. A stolen token is a perfectly good key, and it walks straight past the guard. Now layer artificial intelligence on top, because that is the accelerant thickening the current. Vulnerability volumes are surging. A genuine tsunami, because AI-augmented scanning finds flaws faster than humans ever could. And the standards body responsible for cataloging those flaws is now asking, in something close to desperation, whether AI itself might be the only thing that can keep pace. There is a vertiginous quality to that. We have built a machine that manufactures the problem and are now hoping the same machine will manage it. Meanwhile, AI coding assistants pull in open-source dependencies, sometimes hallucinated ones that don't even exist, until an attacker helpfully creates them, faster than any security review can vet. The pipeline that builds our software has itself become a channel of infection. So the perimeter is gone, the dependencies are invisible, and the pace of discovery has left human review behind. What does the deep current carry us toward? Toward a world where the only defensible unit is not the network, but the identity, and the piece of data itself. Notice the shape of the billion-dollar acquisition this week. A firm buying another to fuse data security with identity, so that privileged access is defined not by a static role written down years ago, but by live business context. That is the tell. When you cannot trust the boundary, you must attach the security to the thing that matters and let it travel with it. The question stops being, "Are you inside my wall?" and becomes, "Should this particular actor, right now, in this particular context, touch this particular byte?" And there is a further twist, because we are no longer only defending against people. The agents are arriving. Autonomous AI processes that act with credentials, that need access, that make decisions faster than any human overseer can review. The reason that acquisition centered on agent control is that the industry has seen the next tenant moving in, a non-human actor operating at machine speed with privileges we barely understand how to scope. Redefining privileged access around context rather than role is not a product feature. It is an admission that the old identity model, built for humans logging in at desks, cannot survive contact with software that acts on its own initiative. That is the current beneath the noise, not any single breach, but the steady erosion of every boundary we once used to reason about safety, and the dawning recognition that we must rebuild security around the data and the identity, human or otherwise, rather than the wall. Hold that thought, because it changes entirely what a defender's job becomes. And that is where we turn next. So we've spent our time together looking at the day's raw material, the botnets, the breaches, the watermarks, the memos. Now let me try to draw the threads together. Because when you step back from the individual incidents, a shape emerges, and the shape is more interesting than any single item on the list. Here is the first thing worth sitting with. Look at where the damage actually happened this week. A bank loses 30 million euros, not because someone cracked the bank, but because a service provider had a flaw. A hardware wallet company discloses a breach of 14,000 customers, not because the wallets failed, but because the shipping and logistics partner was compromised. A Scottish prosecutor's office suffers a breach that may be widening, and the culprit is a third party that quietly serviced several agencies at once. The pattern is not subtle. The perimeter you defend is no longer the perimeter that matters. Your security is now the arithmetic mean of everyone you've ever handed a spreadsheet to. And the adversaries have understood this before most boardrooms have. They no longer besiege the castle. They befriend the man who delivers the castle's groceries. The second-order implication is that risk management is becoming an exercise in cartography. You cannot defend what you cannot see, and most organizations genuinely do not have a map of who holds their data downstream. Which brings me to why boards keep being surprised. There's a recurring puzzle in this field. Why do the people with ultimate accountability so often underestimate technology risk until it has become a crisis? Part of the answer is that technical risk speaks a language boards were never taught, and part is that the failure modes are now relational rather than technical. A board can understand our firewall was breached. It struggles with our vendor's authentication library had a hard-coded cryptographic key identical across every installation on Earth. And yet that second sentence, a hard-coded key, common on the internet, granting any knowledgeable attacker access to all deployments simultaneously, is precisely the kind of thing quietly sitting in critical infrastructure right now. That is not a bug. That is a systemic, single point of failure, wearing the costume of a bug. Watch, over the coming months, for whether governance actually adapts to this, whether the people transitioning from technical roles into strategic leadership can carry the fluency with them, or whether it evaporates the moment it reaches the boardroom door. Now, the loudest theme of the week, and the one I want you to hold most carefully, is artificial intelligence pressing on both sides of the ledger at once. On one side, AI-augmented scanning is producing such a surge of discovered vulnerabilities that the very institution responsible for cataloging them is asking whether AI is the only thing that can keep pace. Think about the loop that describes. The tools that find the flaws faster than humans can triage them are the same class of tools proposed to do the triage. We are automating the flood and then automating the sandbags and hoping the second automation is faster than the first. On the other side, AI coding assistants are pulling in unvetted, sometimes hallucinated, software dependencies faster than any review can catch, poisoning the supply chain not with malice, but with confident carelessness. The lesson here is old and worth repeating. Speed without provenance is not progress. It's just accelerated liability. And then the watermarks saga, which is almost a fable. One firm builds a way to mark its AI-generated text so it can be identified. Within days, the web fills with tools claiming to strip that mark, and almost none of them can prove they work, partly because the detector was never released, so nobody can verify anything on either side. We have arrived at a market in unfalsifiable claims, sellers of removal, sellers of detection, and no shared ground truth between them. Watch this, because it's the template for a great deal of what's coming. When you cannot verify the thing itself, you end up trading in reputations and assertions, and that is a wonderful climate for fraud, which is the last thread. Notice how much of the week is simply crime, professionalized. 94 fraudulent call centers shut down in one country. Espionage crews running cryptocurrency scams on the side, because why choose? And a government memo inviting private security firms to apply for permission to hack foreign cybercriminals, the state formally licensing the counterpunch. That is a genuinely consequential turn. Offensive action outsourced to the private sector changes the incentives of everyone in this ecosystem, and the question you should be asking is not, will it work, but what does it teach the adversaries and what does it teach the firms? So what do you watch? Watch your vendors, because that's where the water comes in. Watch whether the institutions can automate defense as fast as offense is automating. And watch for verifiability, because in a world of watermarks and removers and hackback permissions, the scarcest and most valuable thing will be the ability to prove what is actually true. That's where I'll leave you. That's the signal for today. The noise will keep coming. We'll keep finding what's underneath it. This has been Signal Ahead with Alfred. Until next time.